Hello everybody, I'm Perry. Today I'm with Eddie Stone, the founder and the CEO of Touchstone Essentials. Hello Eddie.
Hi Perry, great to have a chance to be with you today.
Yes, I'm glad to have you here today with us too. Eddie, what are you going to bring us today?
Perry, I thought we would build on the themes that we've been talking about over the past several weeks. Those things from a lifestyle standpoint and a food standpoint that can have an impact not only on how we feel today, right? How well we sleep and how much energy we have throughout the day and how we're able to control our weight, but also on our longevity. What are those things that have a long-term impact on how long we live and the quality of that life?
Okay, so please go on.
Okay, so for some of your audience, I hope the term blue zones are familiar, and perhaps they've read about it. And if you haven't read much about blue zones, I would encourage you to maybe go online and do a little bit of reading. But blue zones have been identified as areas of the world where people live longer than their neighbors, so to speak. And blue zones can be defined by probably at least a 10-year extended life expectancy for a certain group of people, say, versus another with similar conditions. In the United States, there's an area called Loma Linda, California, with a religious organization or a religious group called Seventh-day Adventists that have a very temperate lifestyle. They're mostly vegan, and they promote a lot of very healthy habits. I don't think they advocate for drinking or smoking or anything like this, and they have a life expectancy that, for all things being equal with the exception of their lifestyle, they tend to live 10 plus years longer than, say, their neighbors. And then there's other parts of the world where this is found. In Central America, there's areas of Costa Rica where there's sort of native dietary habits that are different and have an impact. In Europe. And so I've made it a point of study to understand blue zones. And one of the things that I think is important, and for those of you that have heard me before, you're going to recognize this as a familiar theme. I'm an advocate for minimizing or eliminating in a person's diet ultra-processed foods. And ultra-processed foods tend to be things that you would refer to as, for example, say a soda. That would be an ultra-processed food. Most of the time when you're eating in a fast food place, the bun or the bread, for example, that you find on a hamburger in a place like that, it's not the same type of baking practices that you find at home or in an artisan bakery. They tend to be things that are manufactured at high speed, and so the ingredients they use are very refined so they can eliminate spoilage, and oftentimes they'll add artificial color and flavor. And so today what I thought I would do is build upon a blog that we recently released, and perhaps Perry, you can put your link to your site in the comments here, and folks can then go to the site if they're curious for more detail. They can click on the community tab and then click on blog, and they can see a variety of things that we've written. But one of the more recent ones we published was about artificial sweeteners, and it's really counterintuitive to think about. A lot of people think about artificial sweeteners being there to use as a substitute for, say, sugar, because of the calories associated with sugar, and people tend to associate calories with weight gain. But what a lot of people don't realize is that artificial sugars have been shown, or I should say artificial sweeteners have been shown to actually contribute to weight gain amongst other issues. And that's because they can have a negative impact on the body in several ways. One of them is that they can disrupt the balance of the good bacteria in the gut. And they also tend to mask the performance of certain hormones in the body that also help us to control our appetite. And so I'm not a fan of artificial sweeteners, I'll tell you right up front. And if someone out there in the audience is a person that consumes a lot of, say, diet drinks, and they're doing that to try to avoid the calories associated with sugar, they may want to revisit that, because there's ample evidence out there, University of Texas, several national and in fact international medical journals that basically say that when you study people who consume a lot of artificial sweeteners, what they find is that they actually gain weight and can average as much as an additional inch on their waistline in a 3 to 5 year period of starting to use artificial sweeteners. So here's this paradox where people are using the artificial sweeteners to avoid the sugar and the calories, and yet it's causing them to gain weight. And this is even true all the way down to when a woman's pregnant. And so we know from several pediatric journals that women that consume diet soft drinks, diet sodas during pregnancy have a tendency to have babies that are overweight. And so obviously that's not what we're looking for when we're trying to find a healthy pregnancy. And so a couple of things to sort of keep in mind. One is that your body releases a hormone called GLP-1. And I'm not trying to help people get into a biology degree here today or biochemistry, but this is a really important hormone because when you're eating, its release helps you to control your appetite. And so it's a signal carrier for the body to say, hey, you know what, we've had enough. All right, let's push ourselves away from the table. But when you're using an artificial sweetener, the body is fooled and doesn't really realize that, we're overeating. And so it's really one of those difficult things where it's almost like what we learned a few years ago with things like no-fat muffins. You actually need some of the fat to help the body to feel full and help to control the appetite. So the bottom line is non-nutritive sweeteners, we'll call them non-nutritive sweeteners, they can have a negative impact because they don't allow the body to use its natural processes to control the appetite. The other thing is they actually trick the brain. And this one becomes even more challenging because when they trick the brain, pardon me, the brain actually thinks it's getting something sweet, so it may think to itself that it's consuming sugar, and when the body believes it's consuming sugar, glucose is going to rise. What it does is it produces insulin, right? Insulin is the chemical used in the body to control the rise of blood sugars, glucose in the bloodstream. It's a really important component of our biochemistry because it helps to escort that glucose into the cell, and that provides a source of energy for your body, and so that's important. But when we have too much production or there's excess production of insulin, it actually works against us. And so it will actually drive down the glucose artificially, right? Because it's taking the levels from what it thinks it should be high, and it's really not high, it's low, it drives it even lower, and it may make you crave more sugar. And so, again, going back to where the inhibiting of the hormone to help control appetite, in this case, excess amounts of artificial sweeteners can cause you to crave even beyond just your normal eating habits. And so you're craving in between meals. And so now you've got excess calorie consumption. And then, of course, this can have a long-term impact because when your body produces too much insulin, eventually it begins to produce a very low grade of insulin. So now the insulin's not as effective as it used to be. And so you don't want to desensitize your body's perception of sugars and sweets because it creates this cascade of chemical impacts that is not healthy for the body. And then the final thing is, we know, and I mentioned this earlier, but just to give you just a little more detail, there's a very delicate balance in the body between hormones and bacteria and a healthy gut. And perhaps some of our listeners, I think I may have mentioned this term before, have heard of the human biome. And when they sequenced the DNA of the human body probably 10 plus years ago now at this point, and they began to study the DNA of our cells, everything about us, one of the things they realized is that we're not just all made up of human DNA. There's DNA there of microorganisms that work compatibly or in conjunction with our body for healthy living, right? We have a symbiotic relationship between these microorganisms that live inside us and on our skin, and probably a concept that's challenging for a lot of people to think about. Maybe we'll have a show about this sometime in the future, but most estimates are that only about 15% of the DNA that would be found, say, in a human being looking at their normal body weight is actually human DNA. The rest is these microorganisms, and they're super important because they almost act like a pharmacy in the body. They're following signals of the body. They're present in our gut. They're present in our bowel. They help us to fight disease. I think I've mentioned before, probably 40+% of our immune system comes from our gut and our digestive system. Well, when you're using artificial sweeteners, it disrupts the function and the life cycle of those bacteria, and actually can allow unhealthy bacteria to grow more prominently. You maybe have heard of people that have an issue associated with yeast or yeast blooms, and they're sick because of this. Well, that's really a bad bacteria that's run amok, right? It's run away in the body because there's no good bacteria there to help balance it. A term you'll often hear is to have a good flora in the body. So that just means you've got a nice balance between good and bad bacteria. And what we know is that artificial sweeteners can damage the gut. And so in this regard, again, just not a great idea. And so if you have trouble sort of identifying this, let me give you some common terms. You can go to the blog and that'll give you the spelling. But we often see aspartame. Sometimes that's referred to as equal. Just know that's an artificial sweetener that the problems we're talking about are present in. There's something called Sweet 1, that's acetylene -K, that's out there. Saccharin, that may be one of the older ones that we know about. Sweet and low is common there. There's also Nectasweet. Sucralose, now sucralose can often fool people. The name, they think perhaps it's like sugar. It's not. Sucralose is Splenda. Again, it's a non-nutritive artificial sweetener. Neotame, that's Nutame sometimes is the brand name. Advantame. But the bottom line is you need to look at these labels to realize what you're putting in the body, because it does have an impact. Now, if you're looking for things to use in its place, and again, I'm an advocate for moderation when it comes to sweets, but if you enjoy sweets, and I certainly do myself, I try to keep it moderate. Organic raw honey is a good source of something sweet to either use in your food cold or in baking. Organic unrefined cane sugar, which is often a brown sugar. And what's valuable there is that these sources contain nutrients that communicate with the body, particularly in the raw organic sugar. You find different types of minerals that help the body better control sugars. Signals are properly in place for hormones, so you don't eat too much. If you need something sweet, sometimes a great source is whole fruits. Here, though, I encourage people to think about the whole fruit and not the juice. And if you're going to drink the juice, and I have to say I've got a habit with orange juice. I love orange juice, but what I do is I probably put 2 ounces of orange juice and about 6 to 8 ounces of sparkling water or soda water, something like that. So I dilute it down so it has less of an impact on my body. It still gives me that sensation of what I'm looking for in terms of flavor. But just know that juice is a source of those liquid calories that do not help a person control their weight. And then you'll often see sometimes in products, and we use this ourselves, monk fruit. Monk fruit in its natural form can be used not only to provide nutrients to a drink, we use it in our super green juice, but also has a sweetness to it and almost no impact negatively on the blood sugar or anything else that we know of from a side effect in the body. Stevia can be okay, but you've got to be careful. You've got to use stevia that's principally made from plant leaves. And of course, when we get into the commercially highly refined stevias, they use other ingredients that can really create challenges and actually mix it with corn syrups and corn solids. And so that's not what you're looking for. So here's the bottom line. And I don't mean to preach, but maybe it comes across that way. If you are trying to live a healthy life, if that's part of your set of goals and what you're trying to do, if it's how you're trying to influence your family with your example, artificial sweeteners should not be on the menu. They're not a great idea, because if you're trying to be healthy, control your weight, it's just not there. I talk about all the time the standard American diet, and pick on the U.S. because of that, because we have a lot of problems associated with fast food and processed foods. I think most estimates are that 75 to 90% of the calories we consume come from these processed foods. And unfortunately, these dietary habits have been adopted by a lot of places around the globe and not with a positive impact. We use a lot of artificial sweeteners in the U.S. in our processed foods, and it's hurting us. And it's actually making us fatter, and all the while we're trying to adopt healthy habits of exercise and other things. And so I'm a big believer that you got to be careful, because the stakes here are really high. I'm really talking about life or death issues. Your diet can kill you. And so that's really what I wanted to start us on today. And I don't know if there's any follow-up questions from past shows, but hopefully people will pay attention now a little bit more to what those artificial sweeteners do.
It is not easy, because once we walk out from home, like here in Thailand, there are plenty of good stuff, sweet drinks, even refined sugar, I mean, we can get fat easily, whatever we take.
There's no question about that. It's the constant supply, the advertisement, the availability. I mean, gosh, when I travel, I just notice that whether it's in the airport or in the lobby of the hotel or when I go to the meeting, I mean, there's just, it's everywhere. And it does mean that you've got to have some discipline, which really comes from thinking about what your goals are. Who do you want to be? And how do you want to live? Do you want to sleep as well as possible? Do you want to feel good about your weight? Do you want to feel good about the aging? And we know excess sugars can lead to joint pain stiffness and more vulnerability to arthritis. And so if that's a person's goals, they need to think about how committed they are, and they're going to have some discipline. And I'm not by any means trying to say it's easy. We actually have introduced a program this past spring called the Transformation Challenge. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty simple program, but what we find is for a lot of people, they begin to confront these issues, right? They don't spring out of bed anymore, and they struggle throughout the day to maintain their energy, and so they're using too much caffeine, maybe in one of those monster type drinks or whatever we want to call them, those high energy sugar-filled drinks. And so we've got a program we have, and people can investigate it more on the website. We actually have a pack we built called the Transformation Pack, but it's about trying to hit a reset button, to take 10 days and change things to get yourself sort of jump started on some new habits. It's not for everybody, but for those that are curious, we've got some information out there. It's about replacing a couple of meals a day with a sensible shake, a combination of, in our case, our greens and our organic protein, and then trying to eat a sensible meal at night. And if people do that, we actually can help them earn a second pack for free. So I know that's not the point of this show, but if people want to understand more, they can contact our support group, and they can also see the Transformation Pack on the website. But we understand that it's a challenge period for sure.
If you're interested, I mean, I would like to lose more, like a couple kilos. How do I join this challenge?
Well, I don't know if you need to lose a couple kilos, but I'll let you make that as a personal decision. You look healthy. But for people that do, here's the first thing they can do. They can email support. So support@touchstoneessentials.com. That's pretty easy to do. I actually think you can also email support@thegoodinside.com, so whichever is easy for a person to remember. And they can ask for the rules and the details for the Transformation Challenge, and they'll happily send back to them a PDF that will help them understand the details. It's pretty simple. We've even got a little suggestion sheet of starting out with a little extra water in the morning and how to use our Boost product in combination. And then from a rule standpoint of how to earn a free pack, and this is actually fun, and I'll tell you the logic behind this. If a person's willing to use social media to sort of video journal their journey, and they'll do this for the entire period of time and share those links with us, we'll actually, no matter what the results are, this is all about hitting a reset button. We're not trying to quantify the results. We're trying to help them find a new set of habits. We'll actually give them a second pack for free once they complete the challenge and turn everything in. And again, our support group can provide the details. But basically, if they'll use Facebook Live, and they can of course use Instagram, but Facebook tends to have more popularity, to say, hey, to their friends and colleagues, I'm going to hit the reset button, and I'm going to ask you guys to support me, and I'm going to share my journey with you over the next 10 days. What we've discovered is, by having this sort of public announcement, maybe that's the way to do it, that people really gain some motivation. Their friends and family really comment very positively with encouraging words. The people they're around on a day-to-day basis tend to ask, how's it going, how you doing? It's a very encouraging environment. And what we know from long-term programs like Weight Watchers, which is a program that's been in place in the U.S. for a very long time, when people do this as a community and they share with people what their goals are, they have more success, and the success they have lasts longer because they've almost invited everybody to be a part of the team and to help with accountability. And so we really enjoy the program. Number one, this has really been my life's work, for right at 30-some years, and I enjoy seeing people get these victories. We just had a gentleman that's head of a large table tennis organization here in the U.S. that during his journey, he lost 6.9 pounds over a 10-day period, and actually he said he was jumping back on another 10 days because he felt so good. It was a good jump start for him. Man, when we see these kinds of things, the positive comments, I think the average person loses between, say, 6 and 9 pounds during the challenge, but the main thing is they get some new habits. And I think in that period of time, they start to be encouraged about what good decisions they can do for themselves. So, it's not for everybody, but if you want to change the dynamics and change your circumstances, hitting a reset button can be a great idea. So that's what the Transformation Challenge is all about.
It sounds fun, Eddie.
It is fun.
Okay, Eddie, thank you very much for sharing with us today. Very interesting.
Thank you, Perry. And listen, the questions that have been coming in, I'm always happy to answer them, and appreciate that everybody shares those, and I'm enjoying seeing what's happening with the audience and some of the health improvements.
Okay, so I'll see you again next show, Eddie. Have a good day.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching, everybody, and tomorrow Galactics Update with Ken Dan. Bye-bye.